But here it seems as though they have focused on an individual who has an international appeal and wants to make peace an international dialogue and has the ability to go ahead and do that, as we have seen the kind of inspiration that Mr. Obama has commanded around the world, and looking at the world in this very globalized and tight-knit and integrated way.
Well, we've got one more guest joining us. Dan Riehl is a blogger. He's live from the BBC's Washington, D.C. bureau. Hi, Dan. Good to speak to you.
Hi, how are you?
Now, very well, thanks. Now, I know some of your views because we've just spent 30 minutes in each other's company on BBC World News television. I know that you object to this award being given to President Obama. So if Tom in Texas is still listening, he wants to know who opponents of this would give it to instead. Who would you have given it to?
George Bush. May I elaborate briefly?
Please do.
I think that one of the things that I think this is a sad day for the world, with all due respect. I think one of the things that makes America great is that we reward accomplishment and not simply hope. And a lot of defenders of Obama, I've heard them talk about symbolism and hope and inspiration and all of these amorphous things. And my fear is that there are large parts of the world that are indeed oppressed and suffering, and that sooner or later the world, I would hope, would find that what American exceptionalism means is not that America is better than anyone else, but that it's our spirit of achieving and rewarding accomplishment and not hope is what made us great. And I would rather have 1,000 exceptional nations as opposed to one that I feel people are trying to, in a way, pull down as opposed to looking inside. And I think this reward, based on symbolism, based on hope, based on... I don't believe that the people of the sub-Sahara or the third world or anywhere have not had hope. I think they've had plenty of hope. I think the world needs action now, and so I would have rather have seen someone who has acted be rewarded.
I'd like to pick up, Ross, on this point about Mr. Riehl's argument for President Bush. I would agree with nominating President Bush for the work that he did in Africa on AIDS. I think that was an area of courage. I think it was an example of true leadership, and one that I think has that kind of global appeal. I think, though, that unfortunately Mr. Bush's record is always going to be clouded by some of the actions that he and his administration took, and it's a shame that the work that he did do on AIDS isn't going to be recognized as it should.
I agree with you there, but with all due respect, I would hope that the Iraqi people who eventually do wind up free and are able to determine their own destiny might disagree with that, realizing it's a very hard road to hoe. He stepped up, and I believe what he did was correct.
Down inside, we've got Mariam here.
I would call myself a citizen of the world, and I would say giving the Nobel Peace Prize to Mr. Bush would have become a catastrophe, I think, and it would be an insult because of his actually...
Well, I really am getting insulted as American from the previous show, listening to people all around the world who never voted for the man, never elected the man, trash him, and I heard a lot of it earlier,
Well, you don't have to have voted for a politician to have an opinion.
Well,
about
with
them.
all due respect, I don't see many Americans going around spending their time bashing every leader of the world, and some of them are pretty decadent and pretty. I mean, you have
Dan. You should tune in. You should tune into World Have Your Say more often.
Yeah.
Basically, Mr. Bush
I'm
had
just
the
getting
chance.
Tired of all the Bush. Let's get over it, people. Let's
but
move
basically,
forward.
let's talk about the world's
George
view.
Bush was a great president.
Okay, Dan. Let's hear him. You're giving us a long list. Dan, let's have a response from you.
Well, I would just like to say I understand that, but when are certain countries going to start taking responsibility for themselves and the politicians they elect or the policies they pursue? Why is it always America? I thought the world doesn't like us very much, but they certainly seem to like us when they're looking somewhere for inspiration. Why not learn from example as opposed to just simply trying to take what we have? I didn't vote for a president of the world, and with all due respect, I understand what's being said here, but I just think that there's some fundamental ideologies here And much of the world is different from the United States, and I understand that, but it happens to work here. And I don't think any American voted for the world's president. Our tax dollars...
But Dan, it seems a bit contradictory, because now you're saying that people look to the United States for the symbolic value, so why not then have a president who is rewarded for the symbolism that he's projecting with the Nobel Peace Prize?
No, but I would rather have them look at their own internal politics. And the American conservatism, if you will, is about individual freedom and individual responsibility. And while I agree, I have no problems when we help countries and we go and assist in the wake of tragedies and so forth and tsunamis. But at some point, I think there are a lot of countries out there that need to start taking responsibility for themselves and not look to us, because I don't think we're going to be able to solve those problems.
Okay. Actually, let me just interrupt all of you to Robert Mugabe as well. Now, you were asking why Barack Obama won this award. Let me read from the committee statement, then we can clear it up once and for all. He says, only very rarely has a person to the same extent as Obama captured the world's attention and given its people hope for a better future. His diplomacy is founded in the concept that those who are to lead the world must do so on the basis of values and attitudes that are shared by the majority of the world's population. Dan, do you like the sound of that?
No, I don't, because, excuse me, no, I don't like the sound of it, because Obama's position is to uphold the Constitution of the United States, and the American people voted for him. It's nice to have the people around the world feel good about our president, but frankly, I don't think most Americans really care. And when someone says, well, it's dialogue, we've had the Camp David Accords, we've had... Bill Clinton had Arafat and the leader of Israel in the White House. We've had dialogue for decades. When are people going to stop chasing hope and start realizing it takes action?
Now, at the beginning of this half hour, Tom in Texas was asking for alternative nominations, so I must make room for a couple of them. Wilson's listening on WGCU in Florida and says...
Reagan, who stopped the Cold War.
Hold on, let me hear these alternative... I object to Obama getting the award. He said, I'd like to give it to myself. I gave more money to charity than Obama. I also do charity work for many different charities, and I served in the U.S. Marines as well, unlike Obama. So Wilson nominates himself, and Zakria in Kathmandu emails...
That's an American I like.
Says, I would rather give the prize to Girija and Jan. What about what he's doing in your country? He's commander-in-chief of many thousands of U.S. military men and women in your country. Do you think what they're doing will benefit peace in the long run?
You mean Dan?
It is not going to do that, because the military, the U.S. is pursuing the military in Afghanistan, and they are not going to win people's hearts and minds yet, because, they are killing civilian people day in and day out.
The Peace Prize has nothing more than leftist political statements to make. In true leftist fashion, they awarded Obama for what he thinks rather than what he's done. Much more worthy recipients would be Morgan Tsvangirai or Aung San Suu Kyi. We've only got, just a few seconds left. Dan, I just wonder, that point that was made earlier, several people have now raised it by email. Can any U.S. president really claim to be a Peace Prize winner, considering the operations that are taking place around the world?
Well, no, and if you looked at the spirit of the Nobel Peace Prize, Obama has now backed off about allowing homosexuals to serve openly in that same military you're talking about. So you could argue he's not even proving to be a strong defender of human rights at home, if you believe that. So I think there's a lot of room for criticism on this award. Thank you.
I think that's fair to say. There's a lot of room for criticism. Some people are finding it. Plenty of others are absolutely delighted. I could start reading messages now that you've sent in, and if I carried on all weekend, I'd still be reading fresh ones.